in progress.
It's Tuesday, the 6th of December, 6:30, and call the FNA committee to order. Note that members Holloway, Mayhew, and Christensen are present, along with mayor, city administrator, city clerk, and several staff. Right. First item is approval of the agenda. Any items to add to the agenda or changes to the agenda? Seeing none, if there's no objections, we'll take the agenda as approved. Seeing none, the agenda is approved. First item is public comment. There are no members of the public present in the council chambers. Just check if there are any online. Right, seeing no members of the public online, we will move on from public comment to minutes. Any modifications or changes to the minutes? If there are no objections, we'll take the minutes as approved. See no objections, the minutes are approved. Consideration of claims report dated December 12th, 2022. I'll share with council members that I have not received any questions regarding the claims report from other council members. Are there any questions or comments regarding the claims report from committee members? If there are no objections, then we'll take the claims report as approved for forwarding to the council on the consent agenda. Seeing no objections, it is so approved. Agenda Bill 22-160 on the topic of termination of buy local subscriber agreement. Is there someone that wishes to speak to us about this item?
Good evening, committee. Tonight, this agenda bill is provided for the committee's review prior to it moving to the city council. We're proposing the termination of the buy local subscriber agreement due to some challenges with the services that we have seen so far. We have had some challenges, as I've described in the analysis portion of the agenda bill. Challenges with the manual work that it has created. The cost of the service actually is a factor in this as well because of the cost. But also efficiencies have been realized. We also have found that it is not going to integrate with the tribal munis ERP, and that the city, in any case, needs to develop its own system of record for managing business licenses and, of course, taxes. We have met with the state. They certainly recall that there was passed legislation where cities had to go either with the state or with the file local payment portal, and there were some cities that chose to do that. I have been in contact with some cities who have also terminated their file local agreement and have, in some cases, seen, for one example, Orchard has realized that they've doubled their business licenses because of using the state. Yes, I was surprised. They've doubled their business license, so they're able to then communicate with more businesses who may or may not have to submit that B&O tax return because of those thresholds for submitting the return. but nonetheless, it has greatly improved on their business licensing program as well as their tax management program. So according to the subscriber agreement, by the 31st of every year, because it's a 10-year agreement that the council agreed to, that by the 31st, the city would need to let the file local folks know that we're terminating the agreement. That doesn't mean that on December 31st, 2022, the agreement would be terminated. We then would stay with file local for a year, that's in the agreement, and then be done after a year. Now that actually works okay because we have transition to make, transitioning to the state for the business licensing service, and then of course the implementation of permitting, licensing, and tax management, that new Tyler Munis application. So that takes time to develop, train, set up new protocols, and so nonetheless that year for transition is something that is feasible for us. So with that, any next steps? This is something that we would be able to promote more into the council.
Yeah, Chris. Looks like somebody had knocked the sound thing under. Dang it.
To consider that they are going to go to state
That's what you need to did it. Okay. Let me know if you guys found it.
The council approved this bill this year that allows
Right.
to notify local that you're
Oh, I know exactly what's going on then. Son of a biscuit.
replacement.
No. Hold on. Hold on.
Reading the write-up, services. So, then question is, how do we expect the transition to take to state thing and to integration with the ERP, regardless of termination? Do we have grounds to have discussions with follow and say, not really meeting the terms of service? We'd like something shorter than a year for termination of contract.
You bring up a good point. Our goal would be to notify them that we're terminating because of these issues and the request for an earlier termination to essentially let us out of the agreement. If that happens, certainly we'd be bringing that back and that would be seen as positive. We do see that it will take about a year for the implementation of
Have through the data from the state system.
correct.
Don't you want to implement the state state system ahead of implementation of the ERP system, which is due next January?
Yes, that's part of our implementation plan. When we set out our plan, we would be then we'd be doing a dual for a time so that we would be on the state and we would be transitioning prior to that formal go live date where we would end file local. So that's part of our project planning timeline that we'll be laying out. But you are correct that we would want to go sooner with the state's business licensing system.
It's supposed to Should we revise to basically say, cancel the contract as soon as reasonably possible, or a year if we're held to contract terms? You guys go negotiate, whatever you get, you don't need to come back.
Yeah, no, I would, you know, if that's a modified motion, absolutely. But the whole motion was, you know, to terminate. And that we would terminate Kyle local as soon as possible, or some other wording that needs to be used.
Right. Yeah, it does. Put in there. Consideration for-
Oh my God, there's somebody here.
So why don't we just add, what do you guys think? Add at the beginning, just the proposed action as is, just add at the beginning. Due to the service not meeting expectations, comma, and then. And, and if there's, if there's. Let me just go back, I should see that right. For some reason, the first time it's popped in my head. And this seems like a consent item. There's no disagreement. Let's approve this as amended to go forward to the full council on the consent agenda. So seeing no disagreement, the amended agenda bill is approved, is so approved. All right.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. All right, next item is Agenda Bill 22-163 regarding memorandum of understanding with the firefighters local. Anyone? Aha, Chief.
Good evening. This agenda bill is to request the council ratify a memorandum of understanding with the International Association of Firefighters Union. Earlier this year, we did a reorganization of the department that brought the fire captain that normally works on shift downstairs to the administrative offices to support our both training program and our volunteer coordination. His current job description only had the training captain in it, so when we added the volunteer responsibility, that obviously changed the scope and responsibility of his position, and we met with the union to negotiate those terms. So the job description has been approved as draft form, and the union has approved this and ratified their side of the MOU. We're just bringing it forward to the hours, because it was reduced from 48 hours per week to 44 hours per week. That's really the only impact to this. The other thing is hours. So with that, I can answer any questions.
Any members, any questions? If there's no questions, then if there's no objection, this also looks like a consent agenda item. If there's no objection, we'll approve this reporting to the full council on the consent agenda. See no objection, it is so approved. Thank you, Chief. All right, next item is Agenda Bill 22-162 regarding the 2021-2022 biennial budget amendment. This is the item that had a first reading at the last council meeting. Is that correct? Mr. Boutet?
Just wanted to provide council with an update. So we had a discussion at the previous council meeting regarding the fire engine truck and essentially discussing whether we should be paying that out of next year's budget or this year's budget. And so where we landed at that with the amendment itself is taken off the table for the most part, that we would pay for that out of this year's budget. Consequently, I have updated the budget amendment for the 21-22 biennium for the most part in here. However, just some slight changes, primarily because we have sufficient appropriation within our non-departmental functional classification in order to make that transfer without additional authority from council. So you're really just going to see kind of an update to our budget ordinance table, taking money from the expenditures column, the non-departmental functional classification, and just turning that over to the transfer out.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, what did the dollar amount end up being?
664,000.
Okay.
So in essence, the amount that we were setting aside for the fire engine truck, same issue again, was roughly about 350,000.
Okay, so so we were right on the shortage, not just quite right on the amount. You treated up to the right amount.
Yes.
And just to be clear, we're taking an amount out of the general fund and shifting it to the internal service fund. Is that
Yes.
correct?
ER&R fund, yes.
Beautiful. Okay. All right. Any questions or comments? Councilmember Hall?
So we reviewed the fire truck and parts of the prior. Just we had a question coming out of that, so they have impact on the finance, but they broke down, there was like 100% pay up front, 75, 50, 25%, and different dollar figures of price reduction. In quick math, the savings is less than what we would get if we just took the money and put it in the bank. So my real question to them was, part of the reason for doing this early upfront payment is to get commitment on delivery dates and potential penalties for not meeting those dates. At what level can we negotiate that at? Is it only at 100%? Can we do it at 50%? What we need to do, because again, the discount is not a financial good decision. Better, like I said, put it in the bank or get a CD for the year it takes to build this truck. So keep that in mind, that might,
Yeah,
that's
so
the dollar figure you're talking about coming out of this year.
yeah, committee tasked us with reviewing that. For the most part, potentially coming back to council with a recommendation, and we'll do that research necessary. But yes, what I've done here is basically I've proposed I guess, a transfer for the full amount of which we've provided council as the estimate. So that was $1 million plus number. It's not that check. So we can transfer up to that amount as we go. Okay. Cover no bases.
All right. Any other questions or comments? If there's no objection, we'll take the amended agenda bill and ordinance as forwarding to the council for final reading as amended. See no objection, is so moved. Thank you.
One was okay. You just go back and forth. Well, what would you do?
I'm not sure there's really anything for item 6. I think I had asked for that to be on there. Definitely. All right. Item 7, we're going to discuss quarterly financial reports. This is something we've been trying to get joined for a while to kind of discuss format of that. Ms. Ferguson, are you ready to speak to us about that topic?
Thank you, committee and chair. For some time now, we have been, because we've got a full plate, we've been trying to work on some financial performance reports. And so I am going to share my screen. If I can. This. So our goal is to, we put together a sample structure, financial performance report, because we are committed to creating a well-rounded, detailed, the right level of details in a financial performance report at the end of every quarter. That is our requirement in financial policy. This is, a rather old memo, but it hasn't changed. So what we wanted to share with F&A committee would be a report, cover page that we would identify notable items in that quarter. If we were above our revenue targets, if we were below, why. Same thing for expenditure, other notable changes. So you can see that we've plugged in some sample bullets. And then, of course, adding in statistics or information that the council would deem good information that you want to know, allow staff in order to provide that for the council. As we move through, I'm just going to move through the section of the financial report would have a brief table of contents. that would be included with every report. And then the next section, we've proposed up a scorecard or an indicator type page with, positive or negative, thumbs up or thumbs down, red, green, yellow, for things like, are we on target with our reserves in each of the types of funds? General fund performance as compared to budget, are we on target? Expenditures, are we on target to budget? So we've proposed up sample indicators, and if there are indicators the council would like to see, you can see in this area where it'd be a defined indicator based on what you would propose. We put in some sample icons, if you will, or graphics that would be a quick snapshot. Some communities have, it's kind of all over the place, but nonetheless, positive or negative, and how the council could quickly see if we were in a good position. Next section of the financial performance report, we would insert tables. We would have quarterly summaries of revenue, expenditures, and fund balances for all funds with any footnotes, and those would be tables that would be included in that report on summary revenues and expenditures. Next session. This is financial ratios. This is something that in other communities I have provided after a time, obviously, that so that the council could see trends, would be to see a ratio analysis. And so that was something that we wanted to show the council that we could do, we could provide if you were interested in seeing something like that in the financial reports. Next session would be financial indicators. This again is another sample of an indicator. I know it's hard to see, but nonetheless, this is an indicator with regards to expenditures. As we work towards gathering historical information, our long-term financial model, this is where we would put out expenditures per capita. That's a common indicator. And the council could see quickly that we would be on track with expenditures that are projected. And then, of course, a historical look back. And then in this case, what we try to provide is some detail to these types of indicators and why. And for example, with the expenditures per capita, if there are changes, why? Is it due to growth in the community? Is it due to expenditures that are impacted by the cost of providing the service? Is it outstripping the community's ability to pay? Other reasons for that is that if an increase in spending is greater than can be accounted for by inflation or a new addition of services, it may indicate a declining productivity. So this is an example of expenditures. We can do revenues per capita. There are other indicators that show improvement or not with regards to use of assets, but this is just an example.
Per capita.
Well, per capita is, it's a common, connection to, how we are doing, and that's why I put in the description why changes in per capita in expenditures, they reflect those expenditures relative to changes in the population, and so that's why that sample description is put in there. It's just a common indicator per capita. There's a number of them, and there's if the council is interested in, there are essentially tons of indicators that we could actually build. But we typically start with expenditures, revenue,
Because that's what I'm backed up. Just what's the dollar figure of expenditure?
Mhm.
And how are we doing the plan? Just a straight dollar figure. That tells us how our internal performance is going.
Mhm.
But you dive into these other indicators for cost. And per capita would be, if we wanted to compare ourselves with other cities, are we providing this level of service at a reasonable or comparable per capita cost? But I haven't seen us get into that conversation. Is the intent to start to do that type of benchmarking?
Well, that's what we're proposing here with this, this type of information coming to the council. It will take us time to build the history. It'll take us time to finalize the financial model because, the FNA committee the council has, we'll be bringing forward that financial model. And so you'll start to see what then we can do with these kinds of indicators. And that's something that you've got a lot of potentially work on your plates that we could add. Or building in some of these types of
Well,
financial
I
reports.
also want to insert that I don't want to overlook you in generating
It's not- it's horrible.
indicators. If we don't have a plan that we're going to use. Okay? We don't have a plan to use them. Just here's what our expected revenue was on a dollar figure. Here's what the actual revenue was. That and the gross level for us, the city, managing the city would help us. But before we step in and put load on you for those other indicators, we ought to have a discussion of what do we do? I don't want you working for a consultant on our end.
But the good news is that this model and our financial model. So, this is work that I've done over many years to build these kind of, I probably have 8 to 12 indicators already done. You plug in the data and it's gonna, and
Okay.
so the work is, the council budget analyst. Thank you. So, we're kind of excited that we can, start to move in this direction to provide information, and, it's not just budget versus actual reports to the council. And that's why, showing you in this sample report, our interest in ratios, in the public sector, they're different ratios. They're similar, but we can actually, as we shift towards, moving away from that cash basis, that obviously reporting differently, but nonetheless, these are the types of ratios that you might be interested in seeing because it tells you very quickly, are we doing good? Are we, what's happened? So, trends tell the council other things about your financial performance. So over time, these will take time to build.
I'm gonna have to go into. Okay.
You can do it.
This person, let me ask you, just as I was sort of looking at so when we first were gonna go through this a few months ago, when we back before I got so busy, my initial thought was this is way more than we need. And, but as I'm sort of thinking about it tonight, the thought that's going through my head is, well, ratios are kind of an accountants, finance kind of person, like people that aren't sort of in our world don't find this somewhat hard unless you give them a benchmark and so they can say, oh, that's where we're supposed to be and that's where we are. They kind of doesn't intuitively you and I will look at, a liquidity ratio. We just know is that a good number? We just know that's a good number or a bad number. But something that isn't in our field, it's just a random number. They don't always good or bad. And so that may not help us. But could you go back to, you were showing us another screen just a moment ago.
This was the screen, this was a sample indicator.
Yeah. Now this is fantastic. So on the previous screen, my thoughts, frankly, were very similar to what I thought I heard Councilor Holloway saying, which is, boy, this is putting me through a lot of work for I think little to no value. This I started, my first thoughts were maybe similar, and then I started to think, you know what? Because we have a very complex budget. And especially since it's a complex budget that's cash basis, which makes it very, very hard to understand. But what you're trying to do here, I think, is try to cut through all of that and make this understandable to the average person. Meaning not just council members, but residents, right? So if what you were trying to do is kind of boil it down to kind of here are some key things to understand, I think this is what some of the department budgets are all trying to do when they try to give us their kind of summary ratios, like police department, and I'm thinking they tell us, you know, time to respond to calls, you know, there's sort of one page where they kind of boil it down, or fire chief, you know, will tell us, you know, how many response, what their response times are, and so on. I think it sort of boils it down, right? So that might be a thing worth doing, so that as we get to the budget, well, we do biannual budget review and then the budget every 2 years, instead of this being sort of this big thing that we haven't looked at in a long time. F&A maybe does, but all the rest don't. Maybe then the budget sort of comes forward as like, yeah, okay, I get it. Odd stuff I'm looking at. We've seen these trends going, whichever way they've been going. Okay, here's the next 2 years. And it sort of feels more of a continuity of thought for them. It might really help the budget process, perhaps, if we're successful at this. So that seems to me like maybe a thing to try for. And so that maybe then the way to focus what you're trying to do here is don't think about things that could be produced, because of course we can produce so much more than frankly people probably can consume, but maybe try to package it up in a way that makes it so that if someone understands these things we are presenting, 3 things, 10 things, whatever we decide on, they understand these things, they pretty well got the whole budget in a nutshell.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that, you know, we hold off on maybe some ratios and, you know, maybe over time.
Maybe
So,
over time.
Maybe this section, we cut that one out, but we start to,
It's split on you. It's half. Yeah.
okay. So we would cut out this section, the ratios, but we would start to build in these financial indicators. Like I said, I'd like to bring back to the F&A that kind of list of indicators, so you can see, you know, what are the possibilities, and maybe we can pick out, you know, a couple of them to start, and, you know, not try to have it all done.
I think that might be a good way to do this, and maybe with the goal of saying, so we sort of think about the budget, like, okay, how would I tell them how the utility funds are doing in a snapshot? What would be, you know, the key things I would try to put there? And then what if we want people to understand how the departmental operating budgets are going, like what would we show them there? With a goal of, yeah, trying to boil it down to the average person, to kind of the guts of it, the key stuff. Like when you do it, you know, Councilmember Holloway's question was, I don't know if you noticed what happened. My observation was he asked you, why per capita? And you gave the answer you gave. And my observation is he thought about it. He was thinking, So he's trying to process what you were saying. So the point is working this through to say, hey, can we give them the ratios that are most useful? Did I get that right? Yeah. So I think that could be a really valuable thing for us to do. So that would be our objective. Not just things we can do, but with a specific goal in mind. Make this understandable, make the budget, boil it down to something that really lets people understand how to understand this part of the budget or that part of the budget. Does that perhaps make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
What do you guys?
I agree with that. I think we'll do a lot to keep us on track to what we should be looking at without getting too distracted or out of the weeds with the things that will maybe really helpful to some folks.
Because we could get into a really fun discussion about, you know, like office supply recharge rates, you know, out to other departments from central purchasing department. Yeah, there's like 2 people in the whole room that even understood what I said. And you laughed because you know I was kidding, but everyone else like, what's he talking about, right? So because it doesn't matter. really, in the big scheme, right? I mean, it matters that you get it right,
Exactly.
but it doesn't matter that the council understands it or that, you know, our neighbor 2 blocks away understands it when they dial in, right? So maybe that's a thing, but I do think there's a different thing. And maybe that's sort of what comes at the end, so to speak, but I think there's a thing that's for this committee, which is, and I think perhaps, I thought maybe that's what Councilmember Holloway was driving at in one of his questions early on, but I think there should be something where we just, probably looks pretty, not the way I want to say it, somewhat resembles the one-page budget that we ended up with, that was really useful, that just tells us, okay, so in that, we had sort of the rows that were really important. I mean, all these columns, historical, here's what happened, but if we think about it from a budget perspective, maybe all we need to know is, okay, here's the budget amount and here's where we're at. And, you know, maybe it's just a couple, maybe it's just those 2 columns, maybe it's a bit more, I don't know, but maybe think about something there where you could just then speak to this committee where you've actually shown us. And of course, everyone will see it, it's in the appendix, but you then are able to go through with us, okay, here it all is, here's all the funds, here's where we stand. And then, you know, we'd be able to, you know, have whatever dialogue with you that we need to quarterly, but then we could then report back to the full council, hey, we've gone through that detail and nothing came to our attention, or such and such came to our attention, whatever the narrative would be. But then what really then would communicate beyond sort of an F&A committee would be these front things that you build, plus any commentary we give based on our review of detail. Does that make sense? Well, does that make sense to you?
That makes sense to me.
Council committee members, does that resonate with you guys?
So that we included in this format, then after some of these sample sections here, is that, you know, we'd have that by fund, that budget versus actual. And so this is where we plug in the, you know, a little bit of narrative of historical, high level, and
But what I'm suggesting is, you know, put in whatever narrative you think would be useful, just to someone, like keep it focused on what lets the average Joe who picks this up just kind of understand. But not like a financial report, which are often written more for financial people or more in details, sometimes even written for lawyers. Not that anyone ever writes something for a lawyer. But, but really just write it for, right? So use that as your guide, not trying to be super comprehensive as in like an annual report or anything, but more just, hey, how do we just help the people understand? But I would say shy away from doing it unless you sort of are convinced it's worth doing. Start out with less, and you can take us through like all those funds, budget versus actual. You don't necessarily need to give us narrative. You can just show us the table, and then we at F&A we can look at that table and figure out what we want to ask you, or you can watch it and say, hey, you want to draw your attention to these 5 things or whatever it is.
and put it in the appendix for F&A.
Put the chart in the appendix, but then the 5 things you want to draw our attention to,
That's
just verbal, just tell us. You don't even need to write it up. I mean, it's up to you, but I would say keep it, the stuff you write up, keep that something that you would want someone to know that without having the benefit of being able to talk to you. They just pick up the report. You think they ought to know that. Then does that make sense? But I really want to sort of push this idea of start out with less, you know, because we don't, at least my point of view is I don't want to burden you with a great big thing when a smaller thing will do, but I think you're onto something with trying to make the budget understandable, and I think that's a good idea. Does that help you?
That is very helpful. Appreciate the feedback.
All right, and then, yeah, the one thing on the one pager, I'll call it, at the end, the kind of detail guy. The thought, so what I've seen is kind of 2 styles in my career. So governments tend to do one of the styles more than the other style. The 2 styles I've seen are, so if we're halfway through a year, it'll say, here's our expenditures to date, which is 6 months. And here's half of the year's salary. Or they'll say, here's the whole salary, the whole year's, here's 6 months of the year's budget, and we're either above or below. Or they'll put in, here's the whole year's budget, and you're at 43% or 54%. The problem with that, what I've found with that approach, especially with a cash basis taxpayer, a cash basis entity, is it doesn't tell you if you're in trouble or if you're not in trouble. Because cash basis means it just depends when you pay the bill, right? Or receive the money, neither of which actually, like if you're an accrual basis, now this maybe holds water. But I think this approach is really not so useful with the cash basis, which we are. So, but in any event, that's one style. The other style, which is the style that I see used far more often than not outside of in the private entity space, so not public entity, is the is instead of saying this is how much we've spent to date, the thing that's reported is here's our current expectation of total year expenditures. And then that's compared to the annual budget, right? So instead of saying we're 43% or 56%, it says we currently anticipate we'll end up at 97%, or we currently anticipate we'll end up at 104%. That just requires, the thing that requires that's different is now someone actually has to update the estimate every quarter when you try to report. So for whatever it's worth, I just wanted to say, I think, especially because we're cash basis, that second way of doing things, I would really encourage you to look at. I think it would be much more useful and let us focus on things that need attention and then spend a lot of time on things that, I mean, just my observation is the conversation gets, I find kind of not very useful to anyone, which is, oh, look, here's this item that's at 43% when I expected it to be at 50%. What's happening here? Response, oh, well, we haven't received a bill for such and such yet. It's sort of this endless, like, nothing really got analyzed there. It was all about timing when a bill came in, as opposed to telling us, are we going to go over budget or not, as we currently think. Does that make some sense?
Well, it makes perfect sense. So we'll look at that and build in that kind of report and start to bring that to you. Some of this is like we talked, is that we start slowly and bring something forward and get feedback and see if we're meeting your expectations.
You make a good point, or you seem to imply a point, at least I thought I heard a point, which is some funds, like capital expenditure funds, just need to know where we're at cash basis spending so far, right? There'd be no purpose served by projecting. But other funds, like operating funds, general funds, would be well served by that. Is this making sense to you guys?
Yeah.
Sure. Everything so far, but that last thing, I'm not sure.
Okay, never mind the last thing I said, but everything before that was a really good idea.
Because as our capital plans change, you get into the question, okay, where does that put us at the end of this? Okay. And with like more than forward looking, we often look back, we look forward.
Yeah, what he said. That's what I meant.
All right, well, I would appreciate this feedback. Help us go. Financial reports.
All right, super. And then I know you've only been here a while, and poor Mr. Boutte has been slaughtered with things this year. It's been one thing after another. And don't forget, he spent a couple of months on tree duty.
No, not for any of that. What an asset.
Yes.
To this organization.
Oh, yes, that. But so not meaning to criticize, please don't hear that, but we should get back to a good cadence of getting those quarterly financial reports on time, I think. Probably none of us are happy that we're short of time with all that.
Yeah, I don't think Drew, myself, the finance team, our goal is really to get into these consistent reports to the council, and so we are definitely committed to that. So we agree with you on our need to provide that information.
All right, super look forward to what you bring back to us.
Again, thank you for the feedback.
Any other items for the agenda tonight? Oh, yeah, it'd be really important to approve the council agenda. That would be a key thing. Let's do that. Okay, so something's wrong with this agenda because where's the 6 o'clock start item? What? I like her. She's just like right back at me. I love it. It's, oh, no, wait a minute. Now I'm getting excited. All right. All right, there's 2 ordinances, right, for second read, I think, on both of them, so, right? All right, jail, sir, so let's see, public safety has 1, 2 items, those are on regular, not on consent. And community development, is that item 1? There's an item? I thought that was a, oh, is that report only coming to the council as well? It is, okay, got it. All right, an item from. Yeah, no, I jumped over public safety in that. So, jail services and. Got it. All right, so an update from behavioral health specialist. All right, and then we've got, and both of those are non-consent. That's what I was asking. So I was asking Parks and Public Works guy a question I should need to ask public safety. All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. All right, and then item from CD, and then Parks and Public Works. You have 1 item non-consent. Okay. F&A, that item will move to consent, right? So no non-consent items from F&A, correct? I mean, we've got the ordinances, but. Committee of the whole, maybe we wrap up, we're hoping to wrap up our list. Yeah. Mayor's report, committee liaison reports, department reports. Accomplishments, milestones. Is that something from administration?
Yeah, and actually, we're gonna move this to the beginning of the meeting, any presentations.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. All right. Any other items? Wait a minute. Oh, potential. Are we gonna have to close? It would have been confusing not to.
It's tradition. Do you want it at 6?
Okay, any other items? Yes, Mayor.
I don't see the MOU on there, with firefighters. No. Oh, we're gonna have to the council.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, no, there's 2 we're talking about, one that we're working on right now. The one for tonight's meeting, yeah, that should be on the agenda.
One from tonight's is consent agenda, is that correct? Yep.
So yeah, there's 2 things tonight. Right.
Okay, any other items? All right, and just maybe I could just confirm. I always, for some reason, get confused about this. I seem to recall somewhere back at the original, the dawn of time when I started on the council, when Holloway was already been here.
Not like
forever.
you've all the time.
Yeah.
You talked all the time, but all right, go on.
Seemed like we had to do something to cancel the meetings for the second half of December. Is that still necessary, or do we just never schedule them now so we don't have to take an action?
If you recall earlier in the year, we brought a calendar and we approved that calendar, which actually agreed to canceling the council meeting and the council committees for.
Great, that's already taken care of. Yeah, okay.
for this year.
Super. All right. Any other additions, changes to the agenda? All right. If there's no objection, then we'll approve the agenda as discussed. Being no objection, it is so approved. Any other business tonight for the committee? All right, seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.